I'm going to ask all the presenters to come up, if they wouldn't mind, just for some final questions now, if we've got some for the floor, and also so as I can present you with some thank you gifts. So is John still around? No, I'm not sure. I knew he had to head off. No, John's gone. Okay, can I just have the rest, Annette and Lynn and Deb, just to come up the front. Now, I've got a quick announcement to make too. There is a white Toyota four-wheel drive that is blocking a few cars at the back here, and its number plate, I think this is an I or an L, I, DPGIP. Oh! Well, I better hurry up and... someone can move it. Okay. Thank you very much. There might be a spare car park out there now. So, look, if there's questions from the floor, I've got time for a couple more of the presenters. If there's anything that, or if there's just a general comment. Yes, I might bring this over though. So everyone can
I've actually got a question for Deb, but also for the broader panel. I was quite interested in this description of advocacy, and it seems to me that advocacy is fundamentally a positive approach, and lobbying is essentially a negative approach built around trying to get dispensation, particularly from governments. The college, because it has no association with government funding, lobbyists are practically useless to it, and it only has advocates. It also seems to me that many of our sort of, if you like, political leaderships, like the VFF and other organisations, are fundamentally about lobbying. So the question is, how do we get, like our lobby groups, who the media principally go to when they need to communicate something about agriculture, how do we get those lobby groups to become advocates?
Who's going to answer that one?
I'll tackle it. No promises. I think the difference between a lobby group and an advocate is definitely in the tone of the communication that they're using and possibly the reason behind it. So the angle that a lobby group is trying to achieve may be similar to an advocate's angle, but they approach it at a different angle. So when we think of lobbyists, you think of force and anger and disappointment and, you know, what do I think about activist groups. I think about political lobbying to try and get milk. Look, I can think of 100 different ones. But why does a lobby group have to lobby? And I suppose in terms of agriculture, and I guess if we narrow it down to that, they have to lobby against a group of people who don't understand what we do. And I guess what advocating does is it helps people at a lower level to understand what you have to do. So if you start advocating at a young age, when you get children involved in agriculture, you get students involved in agriculture, you get parents who understand what agriculture is about, and they vote that way because they have an understanding of what is at stake with agriculture, then the lobby groups don't have such a big job to do, because in theory, if people at all levels of society understand the importance of food and fibre, it should kind of be obvious that farmers need to make a profit and that milk prices should be fair and that imports should not be detrimental to Australian trade and Australian farmers in particular. And some of those purposes by which we lobby, or the purposes for which we lobby, one would like to think in an ideal world would kind of disappear. I think the problem with lobbying is it sets up an adversarial situation. And if you've got an adversarial situation, you haven't got a win-win situation. And what I think advocating is about ensuring that there's a win-win situation. And that probably underlies the two different approaches. And I think one can work and one rarely works. Unless, well, I mean, I guess, actually, I just have to counteract myself, because who's one of the best lobbyists we have? And that's PETA or HSUS. They are incredibly effective at lobbying and activism. But I think it's through the stories they tell and the pictures they put in our head that they become so effective. So what do you think? Are they a lobby group or an advocate group? Mm. Well, you can see in those photos I put up of the European farmers, they've obviously not so much chosen the advocacy role, they've chosen the adversarial lobbying group, and they get very angry and they get people on their side by blocking highways and squirting cow's milk at police officers and stuff. That culture enables them to do that effectively and have results. I think if you tried that approach here in this country, you would end up with a far more adversarial situation than you started with, because the Australian culture doesn't really like that process, and they don't understand. In France, the French people fully support their farmers, so they don't actually mind that their highways are blocked for 3 days when there's a bunch of apples and rotten things in the middle of it. Can you imagine doing that in Australia? So what I'd say is probably they've done their groundwork, they've got support already. Why they have to lobby, I'm not entirely sure, because I don't know the politics in France, but it is interesting where the people support the lobbying action of farmers in France, but if Australian farmers lobbied, we'd be considered very on the nose. I don't know, what do you think, Lynette? Anyone better?
Okay, one more question.
Just
Simon.
Question today. You talked about sustainable farm families and that program that you did. If you hadn't taken that opportunity up, what help would you have got, if any, and when do you think that would have come in that sort of journey of difficulty that you were going through?
The sustainable farm families were probably... We did that course mostly before we realised we were having issues. I think any advisor, friends, whatever, would really... is who you need to be talking to. Anybody that you can have an ear of, and listen to people that listen to outside people when they tell you that you don't look happy. If that answers your questions. But the sustainable farm families probably made us more aware of where we're up to, and it was the other groups that we're involved with, although it was not really their aim to analyse the physical and mental well-being of their people that were involved, probably more brought it out.
Can I add to that? We were also a graduate of that program and found a lot of value out of being part of that Sustainable Farm Families program, which is now unfunded and desperately trying to get itself working without government funding. But I think there's very few times that farmers are given information about their own well-being and health in this day and age. You'll go looking for it when you're sick. When you know you're sick, you'll get told by people, but you rarely get that opportunity to sit down with a group of other farmers and investigate your own family health and be prepared for warning signs. And the fact that Sustainable Farm Families no longer exists does beg the question, if a program like that doesn't exist for farmers, how do they become prepared to acknowledge that they need to investigate their own health on a regular basis to ensure the future health of themselves and their farms? So I'd like to see that program get funded again, truthfully.
Okay, thank you. Well, on that note, I might ask Simon to come up and we'll present some small gifts. Now, David, please don't scoff at what I'm going to present you. It's not from McLaren Vale, but hopefully it tastes good.
Don't worry, I'll take
And after all the presentations on alcohol, please drink wisely. Not in front of the kids. But thank you. Let's put our hands together for our presenters today. And the last thing I want to say is just to acknowledge our sponsors again, Harwood Andrews, Fairfax Agricultural Media, the William Buckland Foundation, ACE Radio, Louise Gourlay and the Webb Trust. So on that note, I'd like to thank you for coming and listening, and now it's time for lunch, and I believe it's out there, so thank you very much.